You know, there's so many challenges with the vaccinations. My prayer is that Fauci would be indicted along with his cohorts in crime. There's been actually outstanding news. Finally, I've been saying for about 25, 27 years when I came out with the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, that USAID is a front for the CIA, and they basically poisoned Africans in Central Africa. They basically were very much involved with the administration of the hepatitis B vaccines that delivered AIDS to the world. And Frank Carlucci III, if you go back into history, Frank Carlucci was overseeing the African arena at that time. And so when you start to look at what the vaccines are, and particularly even today's COVID vaccines and mRNA vaccines particularly, that's how HIV/AIDS works. The basic construct and process by which HIV causes the never before seen leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, immune suppression, cancer complex, never before seen. Before you had the first case in 1976, and subsequently that was in New York among a gay man. The concept of the patient zero gate and Dugas was a fraud. There were numerous gay men in New York City who received the hepatitis B vaccine that was administered by Merck, as well as the CDC, as well as the United States Army, as well as the Population Council of the City of New York that gave rise to the New York Blood Bank that basically was a Rockefeller entity that gave us the American Red Double Cross. So you go back in history and you begin to see that this mRNA concept of how you could actually change DNA and modify its expression by laboratory creation of messenger RNA. And that's how COVID vaccine works. And again, one of the most disgusting suppressed facts is that about 62% of the spike protein gain of function antigen associated with COVID-19, which is actually a SARS-CoV-19 bat coronavirus recombinant with HIV, AIDS. That 62% of it is directly from Fauci's inner circles of discoveries, the patents that had to do with how you could actually get the never before seen leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, immune suppression, cancer complex, prompted by messenger RNA to alter DNA. That's really HIV/AIDS research and development. And that dates back to the late 60s. By 1972 through 74, they had it. There's smoking gun evidence of what I'm saying right now in the United States congressional record. All you have to do is go back to the appropriations hearing of 1970, wherein Henry Kissinger had already ordered Admiral Zumwalt from the Navy. Navy biological research labs have always been at the forefront of biological weaponry and intelligence, by the way, overseeing even CIA. And so the order to Zumwalt was to come up with something supposedly that's going to defeat the Russian advancements towards biological weaponry. And as a result, the appropriations request hearing of 1970 financed precisely what is a definition of the AIDS virus. They literally created the HIV/AIDS virus to be an immune suppressant cancer complex type of virus. And that was financed for $10 million over 5 years. So that kicked in 1970. They already knew it because of Zumwalt's report to Kissinger. Kissinger signed off on it as National Security Advisor under Richard Nixon in 1969. So 70, the appropriations hearing came in that actually had the definition of what they were developing in the lab. The closest definition of HIV/AIDS that you could actually read is in the United States congressional record. And so that's where HIV came from. By 1972, they had the virus. And of course, to get the vaccines, you have to have the virus first, which again deals in particular with mRNA vaccines. You have to deal with looking back with COVID. You have to realize that Fauci already had the virus by probably 2015, certainly by 2017. They were already planning to loose it because of the actual lecture that Fauci gave at Georgetown University as Trump administration of 45 was taking place. That's when Fauci came out in January and saying the Trump administration, the newly incoming Trump administration, is going to suffer one of the most serious plagues that the world has ever seen, really.
The idea that we are now a few days away from a new administration, which really, I think, set the stage for so many of the things that we are going to be dealing with over the coming years, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And
how did he know? Because he already had the virus. You know, the virus supposedly didn't come out till a bit later, but this was until 2019. Late October, November, December 2019. But this was in 2017. So they already had the virus, and they already had the plans for the vaccinations. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Programs Agency, they worked with all of the devil doers. They financed the devil doers. Supposedly today, you have Epstein's records and his client list being released by Pam Bondi. One of the things that you'll see on there is Bill Gates. Again, what's going to be censored, what's going to be struck is going to be interesting. But the bottom line is that, you know, all of the science, the main science, besides Stanford, took place at MIT and Harvard, at the Langer and Charles Lieber labs. They worked with initially the fundamental research that Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill was developing. If you now study the ongoing investigations, you find they stop at Ralph Barrick working with Fauci and USAID to finance the Wuhan laboratory operations through Peter Daszak, Dr. Daszak, with the EcoHealth Alliance. And once you then see that the millions and millions of dollars were being administered to advance COVID as a bioweapon, you know, an advanced function bioweapon, which is the spike protein antigen, that's the gain of function antigen that then prompts the DNA to output more poison, more spike protein antigen. So you have the virus as well as the bioweapon, then the vaccine outcome prompting what we're witnessing, what's called long COVID. This week, it's been announced that there's been more cases of COVID-19 here in 2025 that we've seen for years. What's taking place is you have never revealed, always concealed reality of there being a bioweapon in most of our bodies, whether we got vaccinated or not. Those of us who, like myself, were not vaccinated, we were exposed. I got COVID twice. And once we got COVID, we had what's called long COVID, because that's how it works. In science, in this field of virology, it's called a lentivirus. That's a slow-acting virus. It integrates into the cells, and then once you have immune suppression associated with lifestyle risks or environmental poisons or intoxications, such as through chemical sprays and whatever other poisons that we then experience and then reduces our immunity, suddenly then these viruses start to express themselves. And then, of course, you have this whole field of counterintelligence that's mixed in. There's a whole group of people that was started by Robert Gallo, Dr. Gallo and Dr. Fauci's colleague, Peter Duesberg, that said, oh, these viruses don't exist. Meanwhile, when you start to read the contracts that are in the Special Virus Cancer Program, originally censored, I came out with it by the grace of God, literally, found it by miracle, got to it by miracle in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Davis Library, wherein the actual contracts I discovered that were associated with the production of these unique viruses under various contracts, including United States Navy Biological Weapons Research Labs, as well as Merck Pharmaceutical Company, as well as NIH and NCI, National Cancer Institute. So that's how in 1996 I was able to piece this together in the best-selling book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola. And that's how then I can speak at this point with absolute certainty about what the history is. So basically, that's where we got HIV, AIDS, as well as the fundamentals of COVID and the fundamentals of depopulation and biological weaponry in this field of now really amounts to genetics and electrogenetics, because now it's evolved beyond the basic benchwork recombination of viruses. And that was done very simply by injecting various viruses, taking viruses from tumors, injecting them into animals, allowing them to incubate in the animals, such as bats, such as bovine, fetal serum, monkey kidney tissues. So you then extract the recombinants after they grow in the animals. That was the old way that they did it. That was before the sophisticated genetic engineering capabilities that they currently have. And that then now leads to what I was saying before. You have Epstein with his group of financiers who are looking at the most advanced ways in which to make money, and depopulation, sick populations, pharmaceutical poisons, causing diseases and depopulation at the same time, which is protective of the status quo. Smaller populations are simply easier to control. Divided populations are easier to control. So that's what you see politically going on, primarily through manipulation of media and fear mentality. And that's the Central Intelligence Agency's domain. Their principal function in all of this, with USAID financing going to Wuhan, you have to remember that the principal function of the CIA is mind control, population control through mind control, which is called MK Ultra, the MK Ultra program. And I've been actually thankful over the last couple nights for Newsmax and Greg Kelly actually covering what I came out with way back in 1996 with Emerging Viruses book. You had the Frank Church Congressional Investigating Committee warning everybody about this, that Frank Church, who was a good legislator from Idaho, led a committee that unfortunately was overseen by Rockefellers. And the Rockefellers, of course, are, up to their eyeballs in this organized crime and depopulation genocide. Nothing was ever done. Nobody really, just like today. That's why I'm praying for Fauci and Pam Bondi to do her job and not only investigate. At this point, we have more evidence. There's probable cause to indict before a grand jury with the evidence that we already have against Fauci and his inner circle. And so that's one of my latest books is called COVID Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. That's on Amazon Kindle. COVID Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. Goes beyond what Kennedy's excellent book shares about Fauci fraud. Kennedy did a marvelous job in about 900 pages revealing Fauci's fraud. So there's plenty of evidence to indict Fauci and bring him to justice.